Hey, and welcome everybody to the mobile home park deal underwriting secrets revealed webinar tonight. I'm excited to be with you guys. It's going to be a fun webinar. We're live on Facebook, YouTube. I don't know where else are we live too. We're live on everywhere that we can be live on StreamYard. And so we'll also have this will be recorded, I believe, too. But once we get to the end, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I'm going to jump into it now. And then as people jump on, we can obviously, I think there's more people jumping on now. So we can wait a second. But I love Lou, what's up, man? I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it. I'm glad I sound good, but I'd love to hear where you're coming in from here. If you jump in, when you jump in and you're in the comments, just shoot me a what state that you're from, or if you're from overseas. We got California in the house, for better or for worse. Um, Florida, my spot, my spot. Love me some Florida. All right. So tonight we're going to talk a lot about underwriting. And as we go, hey, Jim, what's up? In Canada, international representing here. So we're going to talk about some underwriting here. And, I get the question about underwriting all the time because we're constantly, looking at deals. We're constantly, seeing deals come in our inboxes and things. And like they can be pretty confusing. Because there's different aspects of these deals that, it's just not really straightforward in a mobile home park deal. It's just not. There's many nuances. There's many things that, you just don't, it just takes experience and a little bit of knowledge to actually kind of figure out. So we're going to get into that tonight, and we're going to talk about that in a lot of detail. And we're going to get into it. So if you guys look, I'm going to go through slides and then shift back. I may go to the calculator and come back, whatever. But we're going to go through this. So if you don't know me, my name's Derek Vickers. You probably do know me. Owner and operator, 38 parks, about to be 41, $130 million, probably give or take a value. I've orchestrated the successful turnaround of 21 communities. And I just got my hair cut, so you can't see the gray in it, but some of that comes with that. But that's been fun. And we're the host of the #1 MHP podcast, the MHP Show. And just to put a plug in for the MHP Show, if you want to check that out, go to iTunes, Spotify, wherever we have a podcast. Also, I'm married to Jazz, and I have two beautiful kids. They're 1.5 and 3.5, and they're wild. So they're going to bed now. And that's usually the time that I can actually get some work done. So that's me. If anybody here, I'd love to know kind of where everybody is in their MHP career. Are you a investor? Are you a passive investor? Are you an operator? Are you a deal finder? Like, what are you? Drop that in the comments. I'd love to know a little bit more about who is here and, see where you're at in your MHP journey. You're a deal finder, passive investor. Do you own parks? I'd love to know that as we go through. So shoot that over in the comments. And then we'll start to get into this here. Okay. So underwriting, the all, complicated topic. And again, I talk to people, daily about mobile home parks, and they're constantly like, hey, like, how do I underwrite this deal? How do I look at this stuff? How do I make sense of the vacant lots? There's park-owned homes. There's abandoned park-owned homes. There's RV lots. There's boat docks. We have a park with some boat docks in there. How do I actually value that stuff? I'm going to at least tell you how I do it and how I would do it. it's not the end all be all, but it's worked for me, and I've been able to create success in this industry by using some of these tactics. So it's always a big question that I get, how to tell if the deal is actually good or not. And so I'm going to clear that up a little bit for you here. Second thing here is like, you want to know this because it's like, what are you going to offer to the seller? Like, if you're dealing, Lou says he's a deal finder here. If you're dealing and talking to these sellers, what happens if you give them a low ball offer, right? They're going to hang up on you, or they're never going to call you again, right? You may have a seller on the phone and, you give them a low ball offer because you may not necessarily know what you're doing. There's a difference between a low ball offer on a decent deal than there is with a, if the guy wants a 3 cap for his property, and anything you offer him is going to be a low ball. So those two things are not in the same category, but you want to get into that sweet spot where you can make a fair offer that works for you, that works for the seller, and that, so you can actually get a deal. So you can actually get a deal, because I did this in the beginning, and I'll get off this page, but I did this in the beginning. I found good deals that I was underwriting based on old tactics that were, like Stone Age. And so my offers were coming in super, super low, and I was getting told to screw off by everyone I talked to. They were all telling me like, dude, your offer sucks. And I got berated on the phone a couple times because the sellers, did not like my offers. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. So let's get into it here. So this is super important. Okay. Now, in order to understand if a deal is good or not, right? And you've heard me talk about this before. This is not on the slide. You have to understand like why you actually want the deal, like why you're actually investing. What are your reasons for investing? Because maybe you have a guy who has, he's got 20 million bucks in the bank, and he has a tax problem. He may just buy a deal and not really care, because he's going to buy it cash, because he's going to do a cost segregation study and capture the depreciation, right, for tax savings, right? Or you may have someone that just wants, just heavy cash flow. They only want to buy deals with, 10 or 15% cash flow in year one, which is, not terrible, but it's just going to be different deals that you buy. Right. And if that is your criteria, you're like, hey, I'm only going to buy stuff that, cash flows 15% in year one, then you're probably not going to buy in, around Atlanta. You're probably not going to buy around, Charlotte. You're probably not going to buy around Houston, or, good markets in Florida. Like, you're not. It's just, the numbers, you're probably not going to get there in year one. So you have to understand, and I'm not going to go into this much, but you have to understand why you want to purchase deals and why you want to get into this business and what kind of deals that you want to buy. Okay. Well, that was number 0. This is number 1. You need to understand the market that you're buying in. Okay. And I'll reiterate this again. You need to freaking understand the market that you're buying in, because some of these things I'm going to talk about, like different ways to look at a deal, like, it's not even going to matter if you don't even understand the market that you're in. Like, what's the lot rent in the market? What is that, right? What are the population metrics there? Have you ran test ads in your market to see what the actual demand is, and to see what actually people are willing to pay for lot rent versus what, mom and pop are charging down the street, and they've been charging for, 30 years, right? So you really have to understand your market. And that really goes back to the first thing that I said, and knowing why you want to get in the business and knowing where you want to invest. Because that's going to make it easier for you to tell if a deal is good or not, because I struggled with this. And this is number 2. Until I got certain about this, I struggled because I wasn't confident in my deals. I wasn't confident in my underwriting, because I struggled with, really understanding what kind of deal that I wanted and what I was looking for. Okay. So, getting down to my criteria, this is just some basic stuff that I look for. Number one is to be able to double the value in 5 years or less. I would rather do that in like 2 or 3 years, which I've done on a lot of deals. Um, and I like to focus on equity creation because, like, when you're still in wealth multiplication mode, you want to, start hopping your wealth, right? And that's where I'm at, right? And if you do that, you're going to have cash flow. Like, my deals are going to cash flow because I am looking for deals that I can double the value of the property within 5 years or less. And you can do that in this business. C, looking at here, can this deal be an 8 cap plus after year one? So I look for that too. Like, can I get this deal to an 8 cap in year one? So I'm solving to that in various ways, whether it's reducing expenses and whatnot. And we'll get into a little bit of that. And then why do I do this? Well, A, is because, I do syndications and I like to give investors a great return. I mean, obviously, because, I'm in this business for the long term. Like, I'm not in this business to do one deal. I want to do great for investors and I want them to come back. B, the GP does well. We do well because we're managing the deal and we're finding the deal. But if we're buying these skinny, thin deals that don't have that equity blast at the end, then it's, not as advantageous for us to put our blood, sweat, and tears into the property. And then C, if you can't do number one, then the property better be relatively hands off. Okay. Because there is, like, yes, that can be your criteria, right? Double the value in 5 years or less. But if I'm buying a property where it's hands off, then that might be different because there's a time, like, headache value there. Like, to double the value of a property in 5 years, there's going to be a little bit of headache because it's going to be a turnaround property. All right. So I'm not going to talk about that anymore. I'm gonna move on a little bit. But if we're going through this, by the way, and if you have questions, just drop it in the comments, and we will get to it at some point. Or if you don't understand something that I go over, or something doesn't make sense, totally just say so, and we'll handle it. Okay. So now we're going to expense ratio. So what I'm doing here is walking you through the process so that you can look at a deal and then punch it in on your calculator and then understand if the deal is good or not. So this is obviously a big factor in that. Expense ratios. My operating expense ratio is 30 to 50%. Is a guideline that I use when I'm back of the napkin mathing on this calculator. And you can ask my wife how much time I spend on that calculator because I'm always fiddling with numbers and trying to figure out how to creatively make deals work. The other some of the factors influencing these expense ratios are obviously the utilities and how they're billed back and all that. If you're billing back utilities, and if you're not, it obviously determines the expense ratio. So I just put some rules of thumb here. Like, if you're at a well and septic park and you're pretty optimized and stabilized, you're going to be 35%, maybe 40%. City water and septic, 35 to 40%, depending on if you're billing back for that stuff or not. Well and wastewater treatment plant, 40%, could be a little bit more. City water and sewer direct billed, 30%. I have seen properties go a little bit under that if everything's direct billed. And then city water and sewer, you bill it back, you're still going to be around 30 to 35% expenses because there is going to be some runoff there. And if I'm looking at a park with just park-owned homes, one way I'd look at that on the in-place numbers, I would do a 50% expense ratio on that. But there's other factors that are involved. I mean, I could sit with you on this page for, my God. We could talk about this for hours. I have a whole course on this where I think I talk about utilities for like a couple hours. But you have to understand this when you're crunching these numbers, right? So if you see a park, um, you can run these numbers while you're on the phone with the seller and give them an offer. Our acquisitions team, we've taught our guys to do that, where you can make a legitimate offer pretty fast to the seller, right? We may come back to this slide, but I wanted to just, before we go into examples, and by the way, um, if anybody has a deal that you have questions about, or maybe you want us to run the numbers on quickly, we'll do that. Just hit it in the comments, and yeah, we'll take a look at it. So vacant lot opportunities. So this is a question that I do get a lot, and I wanted to cover this, right? So vacant lots. I had someone send me a deal with vacant lots the other day, and I talked to him about this. Number one, I like to make sure the deal works without them being filled. All right, because they're a pain. They're a pain to do, right? And two, 3, and 4 on this. Look, infill will be the icing on the cake. If your deal works with the 20 occupied that's there, the extra 5, if you fill those up, like that's going to be icing on the cake for you. Okay. That's just the way I like to look at that, because the number 3 here, we're looking infill as a skill, and in my opinion, not a good option for your first deal. I know it's tempting. You see the seller financing deal with the minimal amount down, and it's 30 vacant lots. It'd be an easy deal to do. You only got to bring a couple $100,000 cash to close, so supposedly. But you haven't even factored bringing in those 20 or 30 homes to the vacant lots, because it's going to be expensive. And if you're doing it right and you're not a cowboy and you're getting permits for everything, dude, it takes a long time. It takes a long time, and you need to be skilled in order to do that. And I know people do this and do infill stuff all the time, so I'm not knocking on it. I just, in my opinion, it's a lot of work. But if you're looking at valuing this stuff in the underwriting, one, as I said, it doesn't, I don't really calculate it in. It's icing on the cake. But number 4, if you are looking at a deal like this, you need to find out if the utilities are there, the water, sewer, and electric, because it costs money to do that. Interestingly enough, your electric pole is, $5,000, depending on who you're using. And if you're pulling permits for that, I mean, good luck. It's going to take forever. I mean, if anybody on here has had experience doing that, you know what I'm talking about. It's just not a straightforward process in these parks. So it can be a pain. Abandoned park-owned homes. Okay. Now, the first thing may shock you. Sometimes I'll give these full value depending on the market. Now, what I mean by that, number 2, if you can't sell handyman specials now, I would not give these much value. Now, what is that? We basically did a ton of parks like this where there were some abandoned, pretty crappy park-owned homes. We still paid full retail for these homes, but then we were able to sell them. As a handyman special for basically nothing. And then we were able to give the people free lot rent. And, we actually let them come in and fix up the house. Now, that is not a strategy that I would use in a market that's not, $500,000 and plus. You can do it in a smaller market. It just takes longer. So if that was not the case, I wouldn't give these much value, because you're probably going to demo them. But in a good market, you would be surprised at what you can do to these. And again, you need to know your market, because if you don't, then you're going to struggle. Like if I'm buying a park in Tampa and let's just say there's 50 occupied and there's 10 vacant park-owned homes. If I'm paying $60,000 a unit, I'll pay full value for them. Maybe I'll pay 60 for them, because I know I can do these, sell these off as a handyman special. So I don't know if that makes sense or not. It's kind of a weird strategy, but it does work. And if you're in a rural market, probably doesn't work as well um, as it could in a larger market. Now, for regular park-owned homes, um, you know, when I'm looking at just the value of a deal, again, once we get into like, hey, these are the different ways to look at a deal, um, then I'll kind of show you how I do that. But the park-owned homes, if they're regular park-owned homes, you can count the rent um, that they have that they're bringing in, but you just got to add a higher expense ratio to it. Um, you sell them for 60K as a handyman special? No, Lou. I just saw that come through, and no, we don't. But basically, I would sell them as a handyman special for like a couple $1,000, but my lot rent in a great market would be $800. And I know if you're buying stuff in other places, you're like $800. That's insane. But not in Orlando or Tampa, Florida. So so check this out. I'm going to pull my calculator up here real quick and show you this, Lou. I'm glad you brought that question up. So no. So let's say I do buy it for 60,000 a lot, but I know in this market that, hey, I'm going to sell this guy this house and I'm going to give them free lot rent, and then they're going to go to market. They're going to go to 800 or $900. So let's say it's 800 times 12. Okay, that's what I'm bringing in yearly at a 35% expense ratio. Then my total revenue there on that particular lot would be 6,200 divided by. I mean, if you want to be aggressive, you can say a six cap in Tampa, which is probably not too far off, and see it's worth 104,000 a pad, right? Or if we back out of this and just do it at a 7 cap, I need a touch screen for this. Then it's worth 89,000 a pad. So you see, you're pulling in you're pulling in value there. Do you see that, Lou? Because if I basically did that, if that lot was vacant and I did that and I paid 60 for it vacant, and then I had to bring on another home for another 30, then that's 900 or 90,000 a pad. So that doesn't work as well. But do you see that and how I would calculate that? Does that make sense? I hope so. So no, I wouldn't sell the home for 60,000 unless it was a really nice home. All right, so you're gonna see this if you're buying these parks and looking at them for a bit. You're gonna see freaking RVs and other stuff there. So look, when I see that there's RVs there, like my main goal is to make them long term, right? So when I'm doing my calculations, sometimes I'm going to assume that I'm going to convert these to long term. So, for example, we have a deal that we're buying, and there's 2 RV lots that the owners did not even make an effort to fill up, right? And we know there's an RV park next door that's full at 7 or 750 a month. And so in my assumptions, I'm going to be like, okay, well, I know with a little bit of marketing, because there's a crazy demand in this market, that I'm going to be able to bring in those RVs at $700 a month because the park next door is full. Okay. And so that's how I'm going to assume that. And I'm only going to look for people long term because I don't like the short term stuff. Okay. Um, because I'm in this business for the, well, air quotes, ease of operation. I'm in the tenant owned home business. If it's RV, I want long term RV. Okay. I know people that do the transient RV business. It's just not for me. I mean, some people love it. It's just not my business model. Okay. And so that's how I'm going to calculate the RV. So the next time that you see a deal that there's an RV component, probably need to dig a little bit more. But if it's in a great market and you can fill up those RVs, I would just assume that you're going to fill them up. If you think you can, because I know in the markets that I'm buying in, because again, I know my market. And so I know that I can fill these up. And if you don't, and you assume that you do, and you're getting, less rental income from these, it could screw your deal up. Apartments and efficiency units, you will see these in deals that you underwrite. I know you do. If you see stuff online, you do. And so what I do, they will have higher expenses. So what I do, if I have a park, it's 25 lots and there's 2 efficiencies, so we have 27. I'm just going to run the numbers based on if those apartments were getting lot rent, right? And then the rest is gravy money, because I know I'm going to have higher expenses there, right? So just as another example here on this, I hope that makes sense, by the way. So on my, when I'm calculating the deal on my calculator, if let's say the 25 lots are getting $500 and the 2 apartments are getting 1,000, I'm just going to assume those apartments are getting 500 too, because I like, if I'm underwriting it quick and figuring out it quick, that extra space there is just kind of gravy money. And I'm only looking at those based on the lot rent, because it's a conservative approach, and you may actually keep a little bit more of that income. Boat slips, unless you have a lot of them, I just don't calculate it. We actually have a deal right now that we're buying. This is the deal right here. This is a picture of the boat slips that came with it, are coming with it. And we haven't even factored that into the underwriting. The deal works without it. And we actually found out that, like, in this market, some of these boat slips are getting, $200 a month, $150 a month. I mean, my God, I think we have 15 of them there, 13 or 15 of them. That, man, if we can get an extra $100 a month, it's starts to get, real numbers, and that's definitely helps your NOI a lot. All right, so before I get into the next part here, I just want to make sure that everybody understands what I went over before. And if not, you can let me know before I get into this next spot, this next part here. And if you haven't, if you just joined us throughout here, please message in the comments. If you're an operator, if you're a passive investor, if you're a deal finder, and we want to do this. So we want to help people connect with the right people too. Maybe you're an operator, you're looking for investors. Maybe you're a deal finder and looking for someone to pitch your deals to. I don't know. But put that in the comments and let us know where you're at in your MHP investing career. And then we'll keep going. All right. So as we get into evaluating deals here, now these next 2 slides here, 3 slides, like, I could just talk about this stuff for a long time. And if you start to get glossy eyed on some of this stuff, please let me know so we can talk a little bit more about this. So, like, what I've learned, right? There's no like one actual way to look at a deal, right? There's only one. There's not just one way, right? There's many angles. There's many different ways that you can look at a deal to see if it fits your buy box, right? And so that's what we're going to talk about here as I'm going through this. I screwed up the thing here. Maybe we'll do that one this time, or this one. We'll see. Okay, so evaluating deals, there are many ways and different ways to look at deals to make you comfortable with the deal. Price per pad is one of them. And I think we had, I'm just checking this here really quick. Yeah, price per pad. Okay, so everybody talks about price per pad, right? And yes, it is a great way to look at a deal. It's a great way to look at a deal. Because, so for example, the park with the boat docks there, I mean, there's stuff trading in that market for 70 and 80,000 a pad. Okay. We have that under contract and we're closing on it next week for 40, 44 a pad. I think we're at. Now, if you look at the numbers on this park, because the rents are very low, it's a 5 cap. It's a 5 cap, right? But I own a park down the street where the rent's $795 and we're $500 below market, between $400 and $500 below market. Now it'll take us a little bit to get up to market, but I just can't pass up on a nice deal at 44,000 a pad in this market, right? Um, and we own something down the street, right? So that would be an example of a deal where it's sort of on paper, you're like, it's a 5 cap on the in place, right? But the price per pad is really good, so you can make sense of it. Right now, on the antithesis of that would be a park that, let's just say it's 100,000 a pad, right? But let's just say the lot rent is 895 or 995. Well, the numbers would kind of shake out on that. You see what I'm saying? So I hope that makes sense on the price per pad. And I'm gonna try to get through these so I don't just blow out on talking about these forever. Cash flow analysis, obviously important. Okay. Um, Sorry, I was looking at the question here, but cash flow is obviously important. You want to do a cash flow analysis clearly on the deal, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Appreciation potential. All right. So I like to look at a deal, and I'm probably skipping ahead a little bit here. So I like to look at a deal like I like to look at the horsepower of the deal is the way I like to look at it. Like, what can this deal actually do? Where is the market lot rent now? So we have a deal that we're looking at. If this guy ever frickin' signs the contract. So I'm going to pull my calculator up here again and show you something here. And this is how I would do this if I'm on the phone with somebody, or just doing it in my head before I actually transition this to my sheets. Hold on, I just got to pull my calculator up here. All right. So I'm looking at this deal. Now we have a mixture of we have some RVs in here. Okay. There's 5 RVs. There's 98 park owned homes. There's 7 tenant owned homes. Right. So when I have all that extra stuff in a deal, I know my business plan. I know what kind of deals I want to buy, and I know the market. Okay. So I know when there's park owned homes, what are you going to do, Derek? You're going to convert them to tenant owned homes. Okay. When there's RVs there, I'm basically going to treat that like a tenant owned home, basically, if that depending on how long they've been there. So they're going to be at the same rent as the tenant owned home. There's only 5 here. And then there's 7 tenant owned homes there already. All right. And I love park and home conversions, by the way. So when I look at this deal, I'm like, okay, I know I can, because again, we have a park down the street. I know that I can rent these. I can get lot rent, $795 here. So we have 100 and I think we have 108 total. Yeah, 108. Okay, so that's going to be my monthly revenue. Now, in this initial assumption here, I'm assuming this based on me going in and stabilizing it, because I know it's city water and city sewer. So I know that I'm going to bill back for water and sewer. I'm automatically assuming that because I know that's what I'm going to do. Okay? And again, that's why you have to understand what kind of deals you want to buy, the business plan you're going to implement, and what that looks like. Right? Because I know the strategy each time that I look at a deal. Okay, so my gross revenue here is 1 million. And I'm just going to be concerned. Maybe I can get the expenses lower here, but it's probably going to be 35%. So now my NOI for this deal, I'm testing it and see what I can make this do after I convert everything. Right. And so the guy's purchase price on this is 7,025,000. So look, I'm at a 9.5 cap after I do all that. Probably take me a year to do that. And I'm just basing that on lot rent. Like, I'm not even calculating in that those 98 park-owned homes that I can sell. I might be able to get 10 grand for each of them, averaging it out. But I'm looking at what this deal can do, right? And so I'm also going to look at this. Let's do my 795 here again. Times 12. And you just have to practice doing this. I can do this so fast, and I'm going slow just because I'm not on my phone, but I'm like, a wizard on the phone. And so now in this market, let's just say we can get a 6.5 cap here. Dude, after I convert all the park-owned homes, I created $3 million of equity, right? So I'm like, okay, well, this deal is kind of interesting. So that's like my first thought. So one way I'm looking at that is like, hey, it's a 9.5 cap after I look at that, or after I do my stuff in year one. And then the value of this is going to be there. Right. So I'm just kind of checking, right? These are all different metrics that you want to check with. I hope that makes sense. I think there was a question on that. If a 5 cap is sort of low, which means a higher price, how is the price per pad lower than the comps? Great question, because the rent's really low. The rent there's $300. It's $300. So the rent is very low. That's why. Okay, and Jared asks, what is your preference on W2 or PM for management? I don't know if I understand that. Maybe you could clarify, Jared, and I'll get to that one. Okay, so we were going to that appreciation potential, comparing with existing deals. Year one strategies, market rent analysis, performance in place. Okay, because that is another way to look at a deal. And I've never heard anybody talk about this stuff, right? Like, they teach you the calculations and stuff, but there's not just one way to look at a deal, right? Yes, you can look at what it's doing in place, right? So that park with the $300 lot rent, if I look at that in place, I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to buy this deal. But I do like it because I own something down the street, and I do like it because the price per pad is good for the area, and I'm $500 below market, right? But if I run the numbers and I'm like, hey, I'm only going to buy 15 caps, and I'm never going to pay more than a 12 cap, then dude, like you would miss out on this deal. Right. So there's different angles and different ways that you can actually look at deals. And I'm constantly like scanning through this stuff. Post implementation of business plan performance, balancing initial performance versus future potential. Again, we've already went over some of this stuff. Is there a limit? So Dave, what's up, Dave? Is there a limit on number or percentages of POHs in a park in your evaluation? I don't understand what that. Can you clarify that a little bit, Dave? Is there a limit on number or percentage of? I'd love to have 100% park-owned homes, and then I can convert them. Is what I like. Jared, property management for your MHP. Do you hire employees or do you contract property managers? Hire employees. It's better. Okay, so we talked about a little bit of this stuff, but how does this deal perform in place? We just talked about that, and how is it going to perform after you implement your business plan? Now, again, it's never like the same. Because if you evaluate an all tenant owned home park that has they're already at market lot rent, yeah, you have to look at the in place a little bit more. But we bought a deal in Orlando. It was 37 park owned homes. I mean, I think the owner was collecting $5,000 a month. And if I would have looked at that, I mean, he was collecting, I'm going to pull out the other calculator here so we can start looking at that. But I'm just trying to show you an example of how, like, you know, there's more than one way to look at a deal, and you can miss out on deals by just, being so rigid and like, hey, I only do this, because there's different ways to sort of look at things. So this deal, I'm going to become an expert at StreamYard at some point. So this deal, the dude was collecting $5,000 a month. The manager was stealing from him. That's revenue. Okay, $60,000 a year. Now, I think on his P&L, it was I think he was losing money, but we'll give him the benefit of the doubt here. 30,000 of 30,000 of NOI, which I know he didn't have that. It was less, and we paid 1.1 million for this. And by the way, I sent those financials to the bank. Don't do that. They didn't do that deal. It's a freaking 2 cap. So if you're looking at rules like, hey, I only buy 15 caps, like, the in place is not a way you would look at that, right? You're like, I'm not buying a 2 cap. This guy's crazy. But it's in Orlando. So check this out. 1.1 million in Orlando, 29,000 a pad. Like, this was I was working this deal at the end of 2020, at the beginning of 2021. Now, if you can find something in Orlando for 29,000 a pad right now, I mean, we'll buy it, yesterday, right? But with this parkway, it was different because I knew that I could go in, and because of market research and what we had done, and we had a park down the street, we knew we could get $795 lot rent. So we went in and filled up the vacant park-owned homes with the handyman specials, like I had mentioned to you before. There's a few tenant-owned homes in there, and people hadn't paid rent in 18 months. One guy. I won't get in. If you actually want to hear the crazy stories about this park, go to my podcast, and I think it's titled "How I Created $2 Million of Value in a Year" or something. And you'll hear some of the crazy stories in that park. So anyways, just from the conversions here, like, we had this park bringing in 29,000 a month, right? So times 12 will be, let's just be conservative. I think we had the expenses a little, we'll just say 35% expenses. So this was a 20 cap after that. So there's your 15 cap, right? But you have to be creative, right? You have to be creative, especially now in this market, because there's more people getting in the industry. There's still a lot of opportunity and a lot of, mom and pop stuff. But you got to get creative and be willing to go in and roll your sleeves up if you want to find some of those deals. All right. And two, I just wanted to say, like, I'm not saying that you shouldn't look at the in place. I'm just saying that it is a way to look at a deal, right? Because I don't think you can say, like, hey, I only buy on in place, on in place NOI. That's it. That's all I do. I don't think you can say that, because it can be different, right? And I don't think you can say, hey, I only buy price per pad, because it could be false in a situation, right? Somebody would say, like, hey, I could never pay 100,000 a pad, but what if the rent is $1,000, right? Everyone's heard of the 1% rule, right? So that would qualify for that. Here's some additional deal considerations. And again, if anybody has a deal that they want us to kind of look at and go through, we can pull that up in the sheet here. How does the deal feel? Now, this Now, I put more stock in this than maybe you think. Okay. Because if I look, so we were looking at a deal. Here's some deals in Lakeland. They were great deals on paper. Like the numbers look good, but then I drove through them and I'm like, yeah, I just don't really like these deals. Like it's not making me vibrate. It's not making me like all tingly. Um, it just wasn't. Right. So I'm like, yeah, I don't like that. And these are just some other questions you have to ask yourself. How much work and effort and gray hair is it going to take to get this deal to that point? The aforementioned deal, the Orlando one, took a little bit of gray hair for sure, but that park was worth 3 million and something after we did that within a year. We bought it for 1.1. Um, Other considerations, like what is the cap rate after you do your thing in year one? Doing your thing, your business plan, you're billing back for utilities, your rent increases, minimizing expenses, all of that and all that and all that. Taking the owner's, truck payment off the financial statement, stuff like that. Um, and these provide different angles to look at deals. So that's what I'm trying to get to you on this. Like there's different angles and ways you can look at these deals. And when I'm looking at deals, I'm always scanning and thinking about these things, and I'm jamming my calculator like, hey, what's the price per pad? Okay, hey, what's the in-place cap rate, right? Okay, boom, it's an 8%, right? Or it's a 5 cap. Oh, if I put the rents to this in year one, boom, 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 what's that gonna look like? All right. Um, and so I wanted to show you like a couple, if you're looking at this here. So you guys have seen me use the deal calculator all the time, right? So I'll just pull up this deal and show you how that I am looking at this. Okay. What does or does not give you the tingles? That's a good question. That's a good question. So it's like I don't know, it's a feel thing. Like so this particular deal, what it was is that we were paying a higher number for it. Um and it just I don't know, just it wasn't, if I was paying like my consideration was if I was paying that number, which was like 70,000 a pad or something, it needed to look a little nicer. And it just wasn't that I don't know, just didn't get my juices flowing. Didn't get my juices flowing. And whoever asked that question, I can't really see, but that that just comes with experience and going through, 50 different parks, you know. Is I need some thumbs up here or something to can you see this? Can you guys see the spreadsheet? Yes? No? Okay. Cool. That is true. That is true. You got a bunch of parks and you've been, on the ground getting your ass kicked. You freaking, you've been through this stuff, right? So yes, you are definitely going to have you're going to have more of a you're going to get the tingling feeling better. You're going to know. There is a knowingness and an intuition about this. And you've probably heard other real estate guys talk about this. I mean, I actually put a lot of stock in that. If I don't go in there and I'm like, man, I'm excited about this deal, and if I'm not excited about the deal, how the hell am I going to go raise money for the deal? Like, if I can't get excited about it, and I like, then how am I going to, how am I going to actually do and provide the value that I can provide? So this deal calculator here, I wanted to just show you a couple of things here and how I would punch through this. Um, so let's talk about that deal with the park owned homes. Um, we were 7 million here. Can probably get 7.5 to 8%. Now we can stay there. My amortization is going to be interest only in year one. But so in my model here, I knew I was like everyone was going to be at 795 after the. Hold on, let's see here. I know I'm going to bring more money for capex here. Um, Guys, I could talk about this stuff for hours. We could go over deals for hours. But look at this. So, it's a 9.5 cap, just as my calculations told me, right? So this is after I implement the business plan though. So if I look at what he has, I think he's about at this average between like I think maybe an $800 average with all of his park owned homes and stuff. So let's just say that, you know, there and we're 50%. And if you're underwriting that like that, with the interest only here in the first year, because what you will get from a bank, you know, it's not terrible. It's not terrible. It's not, it's not great either. And I may be off on the money that we're bringing here, but um, so look, the boxes I'm going to look at price per pad in this market. Yeah, it's pretty good. Maybe a little high. Again, you got to know your market. Two, the in place cap rate based on what the seller has. It's a 7 cap, maybe lower because maybe the expenses are higher here. That probably is higher because he's actually not billing back for water and sewer, which we'll do. So that's fine. And I can look at it like that, but I'm going to be like, hey, so after I go in and do this work, I'm going to get the expenses down to here. I'm going to peg everybody here and boom, I'm going to be here and I'm going to have implemented my business plan. I'm going to have build back the water. It's going to be all tenant owned homes. It's going to be a nice property. We're going to, clean it up a little bit. We're going to get some knuckleheads out of there if there are some. And if you own stuff, you know that there's one in every park. And so that's how I would look at that. Right. And then after I get everybody there, so maybe I get an increase of 50 or $60 a year here. So let's say 60 times 4, 240 plus 795. And I know this sounds freaking crazy. $1,000 for lot rent, but it's already achieved in certain markets. And some of y'all, probably know that. So this year I'm going to come down to my stabilized here and we're at 108. And when my rent, we'll say it's 35% expenses, 6.5 cap. We're at 13 million. So 1.91, but I think like you could probably exit this property at a 6 cap. So then you're 14 and you got your double there that I'm looking for. You got your double there. But again, I like this deal because I'm not even counting what I can sell the park owned homes for. I mean, I don't know about you, but I guarantee you, um, I guarantee you, I can sell these homes for 10,000 a piece. I mean, that's another $1,000,000. It's another $1,000,000 that I'm not even factoring in there, right? So the deal works without that, and then the extra park owned home sales is just like icing on the cake. So it's a great deal. But again, you may not think so if you're looking at that deal and not thinking with your business plan in mind and not thinking like, hey, how can what am I going to do here? How am I going to turn around this property and what am I going to do? Okay, so we can start. We'll do some Q&A here, and I already see some questions coming through. So I would love to think about your questions on this. If you want me to run through another deal that we're doing or that you have, I would be happy to do that. Before we get into the Q&A, I wanted to tell you guys about our stupid, sick, ridiculous offer that I put together on a Sunday, and Paul said I was freaking crazy. He's like, dude, man, why are you doing that? Like, you're giving away all your stuff. And I was like, dude, I don't care. Like, it is what it is. I want to help people. And so I just wanted to show you guys this before we get into the Q&A. So in 2 weeks, that would be the July, I think it's, July the 13th. July the 13th and 14th. I'm going into this even more. It's going to be a 2-day masterclass where I'm going into this even more than I did today because we're an hour in, and I don't think anybody's asleep yet, but maybe they are. And we're not done yet tonight, by the way, guys. So I'm going to go a little bit more, but it's going to be a live virtual event, and we're going to go through underwriting from A to Z. Like, you could come into this and be like, I don't know shit about underwriting. Like, I don't know shit how to underwrite deals. And then afterwards, I guarantee you're going to have the confidence that the next time you get on a call, the next time you talk to the seller, the next time that the seller says, send me an offer when you don't even know shit about the park, like, you're going to be able to do it. Because if you guys are deal finders out there, how many times does the seller say, send me an offer? I don't even know what's there. And maybe you can do some research and find it. But that's all the data that I need. I need to know how many pads are there and how many of them are occupied. And then I can figure out a ballpark offer that I can at least give a reasonable, not make them tell me to screw off. So we're going to talk about all these strategies. We're going to underwrite your deals, but the bonuses that we've got coming into this. So the deal calculator that I just showed you is going to come with that. I have a pro forma calculator, which is a much more complicated version. And I can show you guys an example of that here in a second. The pro forma calculator is sick. If you're doing syndications, if you're doing, you're bringing investors in, it'll actually help you calculate the waterfall structure on your deals. It'll so you can actually see, like, hey, if I structure the deal this way, the investor is going to do this, is going to get this kind of return, right? Because that's important when you're looking at deals too. If you're looking to bring investors, like, my first priority is like, hey, is the investor going to do well? Is the investor going to double their money plus, right? So this calculator helps me do that. And I'll actually show you guys an example on that. The due diligence checklist. All right, guys, we were selling a program of this. I mean, dude, this is just years of me screwing stuff up, right? This is years of me screwing stuff up so you don't have to. Like, not checking this on the septic, not checking this on the well, not understanding this, right? So the due diligence checklist is going to take you through all that. Private utility due diligence, because I've done it. Many times I own many parks with private utilities. They don't scare me as long as I can get smart about them. So the due diligence checklist, I mean, that alone could save you thousands of dollars. I mean, it could save you a blowing up deal, right? The due diligence checklist is sick. I got to tell you, just especially if you're new, personal deal underwriting, exclusive group Q&A with me, because that's what we're going to be doing on those 2 days. We're going to be going into this more in depth so you can get more confident, you can get more certain. I know. I remember when I was there in the beginning, and man, did I just pissed off a lot of sellers because I like the formula and the calculation I was using to send offers was just old and it was crappy. And you'll get access to the recordings of this. And this is for $297, guys. I mean, I mean, I couldn't even, but when we were putting this page together, I looked at that. I'm like, damn, we're giving away a lot of stuff for $297, and we're doing the 2-day live. You're gonna have access to me live completely for 2 days for $297. It's sick offer, guys, and we've done these 2 days before, and they're just action packed with value, and you'll get more comfortable and more confident in your underwriting and everything else, mobile home parks, because I love talking about this stuff. The other thing on the Q&A, let's see what we have here. I want to open this up. Let's see. How do you figure CapEx? Great question. So that comes with experience, really. I mean, and knowing what stuff costs, going out to the property, seeing what needs to be done there, if there needs to be fences put up, if there needs to be roads paved. Paving's expensive. If you need to, you just have to know, and you have to walk the property, and that just comes from experience of me going out, looking at deals, walking deals, and understanding what that is. And that's just what you get from learning, going out and driving deals, going out and actually looking at deals. Um, okay, next question. Do you have a way that we can connect with you? Absolutely. I'm on all social media platforms: LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. Maybe we could throw some links up there. Jared would love to connect. Let's see. Dean had a question. How do you value a RTO POH over and above lot rent? Okay, great question. So again, it depends on how we're actually going to look at this deal. So I'm assuming that you're saying that, like, hey, the RTO is coming in. Let's say if our lot rent's, $700, we're getting 400 in RTO. I'm going to try to buy that deal based on lot rent only again, because the RTO is just gravy money, and like the bank is not going to count that. So if you're buying that deal and you're going to the bank and say, hey, we need you to count this RTO income, then they're not going to do it. Maybe there's a bank that will do it. But I do like, Dean, that if we do buy a POH and we can get an RTO on it, that's freaking even better, because that's going to just blow up the cash flow, right? So on this deal, so let's just we can talk a little bit more about this actually. So let's look at this here on and that's a great question, Dean, because it's, it can be confusing. So like we're looking at this deal here. So this, we were just assuming the lot rent. So let's just imagine that we can get another $100 RTO, or even $200. Like, what happens to this deal? And I know that, like, some of these are already tenant owned. It's maybe there's 5 RVs and 7 tenants. There's 13 here. So like maybe where our average would be maybe 970 or something. But look what this does to the cash flow, right? It's sick. And in some of these markets, you can actually get more RTO, right? But I was just doing the numbers on this deal based on the lot rent that's there. So that's how I would underwrite that too. I'm going to underwrite it based on the lot rent, and then the RTO is just gravy money. And if they're trying to charge you, like, if they're capping the RTO income, then, like, I mean, you probably can't do the deal. Does that answer your question, Dean, or were you looking for something else? I mean, I'm open to questions right now, because that is a good question, because you will see that. You will see the RTO, but again, I look at it as lot rent, but I love the idea of the RTO if I have park-owned homes and I can, sell them as an RTO, because there's going to be a lot of extra income there. Let's see. Was there any other questions on here that we missed? Let's see here. Paul, you want to take a look? Can you take a look and see if there's any other questions here? Oh, hold on a second. What'd you say?
Yeah, Lou's asking, how do you figure out CapEx?
Oh, we already got that one. We already got that one.
Okay,
we already got that one. So we're good. Do you pay shell value for park-owned home on top of lot rent? No, because I think what you're asking is that I think what you're asking that is, if I'm gonna pay, if they're getting $500 in lot rent and the box is worth 10, I'm gonna try and get lot rent only, because then there's some gravy money left there for me, Lou. There's that extra, if the home's worth 10 grand, then there's an extra 10 grand that I can get by selling, or I can do the little RTO thing and just, explode the cash flow. So no. Let's see. There's another one. Jim, what's happening? How does the value of the home change in relation to lot rent? Well, the value of the home, and what we've found Doesn't necessarily change based on the lot rent. It's almost a factor of just how nice the home is, how nice the park is. And what we found is that lot rent doesn't really matter or determine the value, like whether it's a lower lot rent or a higher lot rent. We've just seen people selling houses for more, just based on how nice that they make it, um, or what kind of work that they've done. If it's a crappy house, it's a crappy house. Um, so I hope that makes sense. That's just what we've seen in our stuff. But the interesting thing about that is that, like, um, people that buy homes, and the consensus is that mobile homes, like they don't increase in value, which is totally not like there's been so much data to disprove that. Since I've been in this business, they say tenants buy these homes and they freaking depreciate. Well, um, they don't, because we've had people buy homes in our parks for, 5 or 10 grand. They turn around and sell them for 30, 40, 50, 60, right? Um, and so it's like, I just haven't seen that in my experience. And, the lot rent hasn't really been a factor in what the value of the home is. But great question. Um, what are the biggest mistakes new investors make when underwriting mobile home parks, and how can they avoid them? Great question. A lot of the stuff that I talked about today, and one of the biggest things is just getting too rigid, right? And just saying that this is the only thing that I look at, right? Because there's other angles, as I told you today, that you can look at a deal and get comfortable with a deal. The other thing is not knowing what kind of deals to buy, as I talked about today, not knowing the market, right? So you have to make that decision, is like, hey, what market do I want to be in, and what kind of deals do I want to buy? Right? You have to make that decision. And once you do that, you're going to find that all the other stuff actually, flows in a little bit better, right? You're going to be able to make deals. You're going to be able to find more deals. It's going to be easier to underwrite because you know what you're looking for. I know what I'm looking for, right? If you notice that, if there's a park owned home, right? I'm going to go through this really quick. There's a park owned home. I know I'm going to convert it to lot rent. So that's how I'm going to underwrite it. There's an RV. I know I'm going to get a long-term tenant in there. So that's how I'm going to underwrite it. There's boat slips. I'm not going to underwrite them because it's gravy money. What was the other things? Apartments. I'm going to assume they're getting lot rent. What was the other thing that I'm missing, Paul? I'm going over here. Oh, utilities. It's going to be 35% for me because I know I'm billing back if there's city water and sewer there. And I may calculate, 35 to 40 if there's private utilities there. So I know those things. I know that for a fact. I know if there's an abandoned park-owned home there, that I'm going to convert it and I'm going to sell it as a handyman special. Now, that doesn't mean I may not try to hit the owner on the price of it a little bit because it's a disaster. But when I'm looking at the deal and what it can do, that's what I'm going to look at. Would you develop a park from scratch? Well, I don't know much about that, Brian. I do get asked that question, and my answer is potentially. Once we get to 10,000 lots or something, maybe it'll be like, okay, let's fricking do a development play here and see what it's about. But I've done city water and city sewer projects. We've dealt with the city and permitting, the health department, the Department of Environmental Protection, and blah, 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 and doing the municipalities and permitting and zoning. And it's just like, it makes my head spin thinking about it. But there's people that do it, and there's people that do it successfully. I would just make sure you understand what you're doing. If it was my first park and I was looking to get into this business this way, I would say no. I would say don't develop. I would get more skilled in the business first. It's going to be capital intensive too. Or maybe you could do a small development. I had a guy in one of my programs who he had developed maybe like a 10 lot mobile home and RV park. So I think he did pretty well with that. It was relatively simple. So maybe you could start with something small and then move up, but I still wouldn't do that as my first deal. Probably give you some brain damage. But also one thing to note, he did that park in Texas, and Texas zoning laws are pretty lax. Lou, when you look at a deal, do you base it on the cap rate once you improve it, not on how it is at the time you buy it? Yeah, so I'm looking at it. I'm looking at it both ways, right? As I talked about a little bit, and I touched on a little bit before, so I'm going to look at it both ways and see what it looks like. But the cap rate, I mean, the cap rate thing, I mean, we could talk about that for hours. I mean, yeah, you're going to go in and make the park nicer, so it's probably going to lower the cap rate on the exit appraisal for sure. But yeah, I mean, when I'm first looking at the deal, um, so the cap rate is NOI divided by purchase price, right? Um, and so if I'm exiting a deal and I know I can get a 6 cap, I mean, there's two, I'm trying to show you the differences here. So when I'm calculating the cap rate, the NOI divided by the purchase price, I'm seeing that okay, the in-place cap rate is this. That's just what it is because it's a number. But on my exit, it's sort of arbitrary because I'm picking the cap rate. So if I'm okay, this is Tampa, it's a 6 cap, probably exited market on a decent deal. Then I'm putting that in my calculation. But I hope that answers your question, Lou, and maybe I can show you an example of that. But so when you look at the deal, you base it on the cap rate once you improve it, not how. Yeah, I mean, that's correct. That's correct. I'm gonna look at it when I'm basing the horsepower of the deal, seeing what it can do. But I'm obviously not gonna offer the owner that price. That's just gonna give me a way to look at it to see what it can do. Because if the owner doesn't give me any pricing guidance, then it's hard, right? So you're gonna have to guess, right, a little bit. But you can kind of tell once you talk to these guys, you can kind of see where they need to be. Like I got that $7 million park. He told me he's like, we'll take 7.5. And I was like, you got to understand negotiation a little bit too. So when he told me that number, there was a couple things that told me. A, that wasn't his number. It's a lower number. And two, there needed to be a 7 in front of it. There needed to be a 7 in front of it. So I offered $7,025,000 for that property. But does that make sense on that question, Lou? If it doesn't, I can try to clarify a little bit more. Because when I'm looking at a deal initially, I'm calculating the cap rate based on what is there. But when I'm looking and determining the horsepower, as I said, of the deal, I'm basically looking at it from, hey, I know I can exit this park at a 6 cap, so I'm going to base that on a 6 cap. Does that make sense? I hope so. Yeah. Yeah. So, and maybe I'll have to, I can show you kind of an example of that, too, where well, let's just take this deal here for an example, and then we'll start, closing out here. But, um, let's see where my calculator is. And this is, this stuff is so interesting to me because I've never, when I was putting together some of the content for this, I was like, I've never really heard anybody really talk about the different angles to look at these deals because there's different ways to do it. So look, let's take this. All right, so let's take this deal. So we're buying this deal, right? So based on the so let's just walk through this really quick. So it's 27 lot park, 16 park owned homes, 10 tenant owned homes, right? I know I can get everybody to 600 in year one for sure. For sure. Right. So, one way I'm going to look at this is I'm going to go 600 times 26. All right. Times 12. That's going to be my gross revenue times 0.65. Are you following me? Because we did a 35% expense ratio when stabilized. So we're going to look at that. Boom. My NOI is 121. I'm buying this park for a million, 1.15. So it's a freaking 10 cap, right? Based on what I'm going to do, because I'm calculating the cap rate here. Now, those are my numbers, what I'm going to do in year one. Now, let's look at it from the seller's perspective. I think his average is, I don't know, maybe 485 or something like that. 26 times 12 times, I like he's getting less rent, so I know his expenses are going to be higher. So that's 90,000 divided by 1150. So it's like a 7, almost an 8 cap right there. Right? That's on his numbers with all of his bullshit expenses taken out, because he's got stupid stuff in there. So you have to sort of go in and extract that from that. So it's a 7.8 cap without even doing anything, right? And I've got some freaking killer seller financing terms on here at 5%. It's a heavy lift, don't get me wrong. So anyway, so that now let me show you this. So that was the way on we're basically calculating the cap rate based on what the seller was doing now and then what I'm going to do. So it's two different ways to look at it. With what the seller had now, it was 7.8%, and after what I did in year one, it was 10. It was a 10 cap or something, I think. Whatever the number was. So what you're talking about on the exit. So I'm like, hey, I ran a test ad, and I know that I can end up getting this here, maybe sooner than we think. But let's just take a look at this. Okay, our expenses probably still going to be there. So that's going to be our NOI. Now, if we're trying to figure out the value, right? So this market conservatively, we'll say a 7 cap. It's 2.3 million right there is what it's worth. And that's after I've gone in and done all the stuff, paved the roads, put the mailboxes up, put the fences up, put the signs up, did all that stuff. Right. So that checks my box for double. It checks my box for getting to an 8 cap in year one. It checks that box. It checks the box for the investors doing well, because they're going to love this deal. It checks the box for us, us doing well, for going in and getting our butts kicked and turning this place around. But that's just the way in looking at it. Like, because on the exit, I'm picking the cap rate because I know what the stabilized cap rate should be in that market. Conservatively, it's a 7 cap. But going in, I'm calculating it to see what the cap rate actually is. So does that, I don't know. I don't know who asked that question, but I hope that sort of makes that make sense a little bit more on the cap rate there. So if anybody has any other questions, we can take a couple more. But just going back, when we're going back to the offer here, so we're going to be talking about more of this and doing more of this on the 2-day, to where we're going to be, obviously going to this into more detail and getting more into the nuances to give you more confidence. More of that, and I hope when we have people on here, we're going to bring more deals to the table to look at. Let's see. We got another question. How do you structure your RTO home sales? Well, there's a couple different ways that you can do that. I mean, there's rent credits. that you can do. I mean, you can do RTOs. It just depends. You just want to talk to your attorney and make sure that you have a compliant, um, structure for that. But a typical would be like they're going to pay a little bit for 5 years. Um, I know a guy that sells mobile homes that does this. That he structures his RTOs for 3 to 5 years, and so basically you just take. If we do something like that, we typically don't charge interest. We'll just charge. Let's say it's a $20,000 house divided by 60 months. That's $416 a month. That would be in addition to the lot rent, wherever you are. But yeah, I mean RTOs. I love RTOs. I love them. I love them if we can get that extra income. Was that deal a JV? Which deal? The 100 space one or the 30 space one? The 100 space one we haven't closed yet, and the 30 space one we're closing in a few weeks. Stay on for another minute and take any other questions, unless I miss some, Paul.
No, I think you grabbed them all.
Cool. So look, guys, we put the link in here, and if you want to check that out, for $297, I mean, you're going to get all the deal calculators. You're going to get all the stuff that you see on here. I mean, it's a sick program, the due diligence checklist, and all that. And we'll do the 2-day masterclass here coming up in 2 weeks. So we'd love to have you there. I think someone asked about the rent credits. Someone asked about how do you structure rent credits? Well, there's a whole form that we have that I can show you how to do that. So, anyways, guys, I appreciate you coming on and staying with me. I love freaking talking about this stuff. And if you want a more intimate, and then something else like this where you can ask more questions, where you'll be in here and you'll be able to like come on live like Paul is right now and ask me questions. That's what we're going to be doing in 2 weeks. We have the link in the chat there. So if you want to check that out, if you have more questions about that, I'd love to have you there. It's going to be sick. And, I always go longer on those days than I expect because we're underwriting deals. We're looking at deals. We're doing all kinds of stuff there. And again, I appreciate you guys. And we will see you next time. And look forward to it. Peace.